My parents called me uneducated trash and screamed at me to get out. "You're a lowlife," my dad yelled. So I said, okay, grabbed my things, and moved into my $15 million Florida beach house. 3 weeks later, they showed up at my door, and let's just say, they didn't expect what happened next. That I'm Alex Miller, 32 years old, and my own father dismissed me as a low life, expelling me from his home moments after I'd settled his medical bills and was secretly funding his entire country club lifestyle. Before I recount how I eventually found liberation on a beach in the Florida Keys, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always remarkable to see the reach these narratives can achieve. It all reached its peak at a dinner gathering, one of those stifling family occasions where the atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken tensions. My brother Daniel had received a minor advancement at his accounting firm, and my parents, Mark and Linda, decided to host a celebration that seemed less about honoring him and more about exhibiting their own perceived achievements to their friends, the Thompsons. For a moment, the only sound in the dining room was the clinking of silverware against porcelain, a sharp, anxious rhythm. My mother, Linda, was holding court, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright from her third glass of wine. My father, Mark, sat at the head of the table, his face a calm, inscrutable mask. He nodded along to my mother's anecdotes, a silent participant in the evening's display. I tried to make light conversation, to offer Daniel some genuine guidance about managing his new team, drawing on my own expertise overseeing a company with over 100 employees. That was my error. My mother's laughter pierced the air, sharp and fragile. "Oh, Alex, I don't think Daniel needs business pointers from someone who simply got fortunate online." The familiar flush of heat ascended my neck. I kept my voice steady. "My company is projected to achieve $15 million in revenue this year, Mom. I believe that's a bit more than just getting lucky." That's when it happened. The facade on my father's face didn't just splinter, it shattered. He slammed his hand on the polished mahogany table, causing the glasses to jump. His face, which I had only ever witnessed in shades of mild approval or quiet displeasure, was twisted into a snarl I didn't recognize. "We've all pretended long enough," he bellowed, his voice echoing in the sudden, absolute silence. He aimed a trembling finger at me. "Get out of our lives, you low life." The world seemed to slow. The Thompsons' expressions were frozen in disbelief. Daniel stared down at his plate, a silent figure. My mother appeared momentarily stunned, as if even she hadn't anticipated this outburst. But I felt a strange, chilling sense of serenity wash over me. A smile touched my lips. It wasn't a joyful smile, but one of liberation. I rose, carefully placing my napkin on the table. I looked at my father, truly looked at him, and simply said, "Okay." I turned to my wife, Sarah, the sole individual in that room who had never wavered, and extended my hand. She took it without hesitation, her grip firm and unwavering. We walked out of that dining room, out of that house, and as the door closed behind us, I understood it wasn't just the end of the party. It was the end of everything I had ever known. And I had never felt more prepared to grasp why I smiled. When my own father labeled me a low life, you must understand the 2 decades that preceded it. You must comprehend the currency of my family, and it was never money, it was approval. And it was a currency I was always bankrupt in. It began when I was a teenager. I was the child who didn't conform. While my older brother Daniel was excelling on his SATs and planning his future in a corporate office, I was in the garage dismantling old computers, attempting to construct something new from the fragments. I perceived the world differently. I saw voids, chances, the emerging power of the internet when most people my age were merely using it for games. I remember being 18, my heart pounding with anticipation. I'd spent weeks drafting a business proposal for a local web design service. I found my mom in the kitchen, meticulously arranging flowers in a vase. "Mom," I began, my voice brimming with optimism, "I've got it, a real plan. I can build websites for all the small businesses downtown. They're all stuck in the 90s. I could transform their entire operations." She didn't look up from her flowers. She just snipped a stem and said, "That's sweet, honey. Now, about those college applications, the deadline for Ohio State is next week. Your father and I truly believe." "I don't want to go to college, Mom," I interjected, the words feeling like a betrayal even to my own ears. "I want to build this." She finally looked at me then, a sigh escaping her lips. It was a sigh I knew well. It was the sound of disappointment. "Alex, be realistic. People like us, we earn degrees, we get stable jobs with benefits. This little hobby of yours is fine for now, but it's time to mature." My little hobby, that's all it ever was to them. Daniel went off to a prestigious university, his path paved with my parents' pride. I remained home, working odd jobs to finance my endeavors. The web design venture failed. An online t-shirt company I started collapsed after 6 months. Each failure was another nail in the coffin of their expectations. I recall having to sell my worn-out Mustang, my single cherished possession, just to cover the costs of that t-shirt debacle. The same week, I overheard my mother conversing with our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, over the fence. "Oh, Daniel is just flourishing," she'd remarked, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "He's on the dean's list again. As for Alex, well, he's finding his way." The pity in her voice was worse than any anger. Through all of it, there was Sarah. We met in high school. She wasn't one of the popular kids. She was quiet, intelligent, with a spark in her eyes that saw something in me no one else did, not even myself. Sometimes, when I was at my lowest, after selling my car and feeling like an utter failure, she appeared at my door. She didn't say, "I told you so," or "Maybe you should listen to your parents." She simply handed me a box. Inside was a brand new laptop. "I sold some of my old textbooks," she stated with a shrug, as if it were insignificant. "You can't build an empire on that ancient piece of junk you're using now. Get back to work." She believed in me. It was that straightforward and that profound. Her conviction was the fuel I ran on when my own tank was empty. I spent my nights immersed in the blue glow of that new screen, educating myself on code, marketing funnels, SEO, the secret language of the digital world. I launched a small consulting service, Momentum Digital. My initial clients were modest: a local bakery, a hardware store. I charged them next to nothing, simply aiming to build a portfolio. Slowly, it began to yield results. The bakery's online orders tripled. The hardware stores started attracting customers from 2 towns over. Word of mouth spread. By the time I was 25, Momentum Digital was a legitimate company. I had a small office, a handful of employees, and a growing roster of clients. Each month, I thought that would suffice. I thought success would be the great equalizer. I was so naive. The first time I grasped that money would never alter their perception of me was when I purchased my first home. It was a modest but pleasant 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood. I had saved every penny. I entered my parents' house holding the keys like a trophy. "I did it," I announced. "I bought a house." My father looked up from his newspaper. "Good for you, son. Let me know if you need some assistance with the down payment. We can." "I don't," I interrupted him, perhaps a little too sharply. "I paid for it all. Every bit of it." The expression on his face wasn't pride. It was confusion, as if the concept of me achieving something substantial without their aid was a foreign tongue he couldn't comprehend. Linda was more direct. "Well, I hope you had it properly inspected. A house is a significant responsibility, Alex. It's not like one of your little internet projects you can just shut down." The divide between us was expanding, and my achievements were the shovel digging it deeper. A few years later, Daniel graduated with his master's degree and a mountain of student debt, roughly $60,000 worth. He complained about it constantly, how it was crippling him. One night, I was on the phone with him, and I simply couldn't listen to it any longer. "What's the total?" I inquired. "What's the total loan amount? What is it?" He told me. The following day, I went to the bank and wired him the full sum. I sent him a text. "It's handled. Go live your life." He called me, stunned. "Alex, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I told him. "You're my brother." But as he stammered his thanks, a strange note crept into his voice. "Man, I can't believe it. 60 grand is just nothing to you, is it?" "Thanks, I guess. It's easy making money on the internet, huh?" There it was again, that subtle barb, the implication that my work wasn't legitimate, that my money wasn't earned through the same sweat and tears as his real job. It was a gift freely given, and it still came with a hint of condescension. It was nothing compared to what transpired with my father a year later. He had a sudden health scare, a heart issue that necessitated emergency surgery and a prolonged hospital stay. The insurance covered some of it, but there was a staggering $75,000 shortfall. My parents were stressed, whispering about their retirement fund, about selling assets. I didn't even waver. I walked into the hospital's billing office and settled the entire balance on my credit card. I informed my parents it was an insurance error that had been rectified. They were relieved, but they never probed too deeply. It was simpler for them to believe in a fortunate mistake than to accept that their uneducated son was the one rescuing them. My success became their safety net, but instead of drawing us closer, it made them resent the very thing that was sustaining them. They relished the benefits of my efforts, but loathed the source it sprang from. They'd let me pay for extravagant family vacations, for renovations on their home, all while my mother delivered backhanded compliments at family dinners. "It's wonderful that Alex can treat us to this," she'd tell our relatives. "He worked so diligently on that little computer of his." The final piece of the puzzle, the factor that directly led to that disastrous dinner party, was the country club. My mother had always dreamed of joining the Westwater Country Club, the pinnacle of social standing in our town. I overheard my dad one day discussing on the phone how the membership fees were simply too exorbitant for them at the moment. So I did it discreetly. I contacted the club, paid the $15,000 annual fee, and instructed them to send the welcome packet to my parents as an anonymous gift from a friend. Linda was ecstatic. She spent the next year talking about nothing else: the golf tournaments, the Sunday brunches, the influential people she was encountering. She wore that membership like a badge of honor, a testament to her and my father's rightful position in society. And she had no idea that her lowlife son was the one footing the entire bill. I kept all of this to myself. I smiled through the affronts, paid the invoices, and hoped that one day they would truly see me, not my bank account, just me, Alex, their son. Back in the car, speeding away from their house, the silence was heavy with the weight of all those years. Sarah reached over and placed her hand on my knee. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I looked at her, the streetlights flashing across her worried face, and for the first time, I felt the full, crushing burden lift from my chest. "I am now," I said. "I think I'm finally done trying." And I knew, deep in my bones, that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The months following my decision to step back were a peculiar blend of liberation and escalating friction. At work, Momentum Digital was booming. We secured a landmark contract with a national athletic brand, triumphing over 3 larger, more established agencies from New York. Our approach, focusing on authentic, story-driven digital campaigns rather than sterile corporate advertisements, was resonating. We were the underdogs who were transforming the landscape. My image appeared on the cover of a small business magazine. My earnings didn't just exceed my father's, they dwarfed them. This success should have been a source of pride for my family. Instead, it became a catalyst for greater discord. It was like pouring fuel on a fire I was desperately trying to extinguish. My generosity, which I had hoped would be a bridge, was being contorted into a weapon against me. After I covered my father's surgery, I had anticipated a shift, a moment of appreciation. What I received was a different kind of quiet, a heavier one. The kind of quiet that stems from someone owing you something they can never repay and resenting you for it. The subtle manipulations grew more frequent, and they often came through my Aunt Karen, my mother's younger sister. Karen had a knack for delivering venom with a sweet smile. She'd phone my mother after seeing some news about my company, her voice a syrupy blend of feigned enthusiasm and genuine malice. I recall my mother calling me one afternoon, her voice strained. "Your Aunt Karen called," she stated, skipping any pleasantries. "She saw that article about you in Digital Marketer Monthly. She said she just can't fathom how you accomplish it all without a degree. She thinks it's just astounding." I could hear the unspoken words hanging in the air. "It's not astounding. It's a fluke. It's embarrassing." "Well, tell Karen I said thanks." I responded, my voice flat. "It just puts us in an awkward position, Alex." My mother persisted, her voice rising. "All our friends, their children have PhDs, they're doctors, lawyers, and we have to explain how our son does whatever it is you do on the computer. I run a multi-million-dollar company, Mom. That's what I do. Don't take that tone with me," she snapped, and the conversation concluded as it always did, with me feeling like a disobedient child. The contrast between my family life and my professional life was becoming jarring. In one world, I was a respected leader, a strategist, an innovator. In the other, I was a disappointment who got lucky. That contrast was never clearer than when I encountered Chadwick Vance at a tech summit in Chicago. Vance was everything my parents would have desired in a son. He possessed an MBA from Wharton, a sharp suit, and an even sharper aura of superiority. He operated a competing agency, a legacy firm that had existed for decades. We were both vying for the same massive account, a new eco-friendly beverage company. We ended up at the same networking event. He spotted me across the room, a smirk playing on his lips. He sauntered over, a drink in his hand. "Miller," he stated, not bothering to offer a handshake. "I'm surprised to see you here. I imagine these events were a little too academic for your taste." "You'd be surprised what you can learn when you're not just reading it from a textbook, Vance," I retorted, keeping my tone light. "Right," he chuckled. "The school of hard knocks. Very quaint. Look, no hard feelings when we secure the pure SIP account. It's just business. They need a firm with a real pedigree, not just a flash in the pan." He walked away, leaving me with a bitter taste in my mouth. He was the physical manifestation of my family's prejudice. 2 weeks later, I received the call. We'd won the account. The CEO of Purisip informed me personally. "Your team's passion was undeniable. You don't merely market a product, you narrate its story. The other guys, they just presented a balance sheet. I hung up the phone, a wave of pure, unadulterated validation washing over me. It was a victory that was entirely mine. It had nothing to do with my family. It was proof that my approach, the path I had forged for myself, possessed value, real, quantifiable value. Meanwhile, my brother Daniel was struggling. His stable job at the accounting firm was a pressure cooker. He was overworked, underappreciated, and consistently being overlooked for promotions. He never admitted it to me directly, but I could detect it in his voice during our brief, awkward phone calls. One day, Sarah approached me. "I was talking to Daniel's wife," she said, her expression troubled. She said Daniel's really been down. His boss is a nightmare, and he feels like he's reached an impasse. I felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything, he was still my brother. I considered it for a day, then I made a call. I had a connection, a former client who was on the board of a rival accounting firm, a much superior one. I didn't directly ask for a favor. I simply spoke highly of my brother. I mentioned his work ethic, his loyalty, his untapped potential. I planted a seed. A month later, Daniel called me, his voice buzzing with an energy I hadn't heard in years. "You're not going to believe this. I got headhunted. A senior position at Grant & Lell. It's a huge step up." I smiled. "That's amazing, man. I'm really happy for you." "Yeah, it's crazy. They just called me out of the blue," he said. "Guess my hard work is finally paying off." I never told him. It was better that way. Let him have his clean triumph. It was this promotion that prompted my mother to arrange the celebratory dinner. The irony was so potent I could taste it. A party to commemorate a success that I had secretly orchestrated, in a house whose comforts were largely subsidized by my unrespectable career. Sarah saw the invitation, and her face fell. "Are you certain you want to go, Alex? You know how these events conclude." I hesitated. Every instinct told me to abstain, to safeguard the fragile peace I was trying to cultivate for myself. But a small, stubborn part of me, the part that still yearned for that impossible approval, felt a pull. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe with Daniel's success, the strange, unspoken rivalry between us would finally cease. Maybe we could simply be a family. "I have to," I told her, my voice more assured than I felt. "It's for Daniel. I have to go." It was a decision driven by a hope I should have known was long gone. I was willingly stepping into the eye of the storm. The drive to my parents' house was quiet. The sun was setting, painting the Ohio sky in shades of orange and purple, a beautiful, tranquil scene that felt like a falsehood. Beside me, Sarah was tense. She kept glancing at me, her brow furrowed with concern. "We don't have to stay long," she said softly, breaking the silence. "We can make an appearance, offer our congratulations, and leave." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "It'll be okay." I was trying to convince myself as much as her. The moment we stepped through the door, the familiar burden settled on my shoulders. The house was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken and my mother's expensive perfume. The Thompsons were already there, chatting with my father in the living room. My mother swooped in, kissing the air next to my cheek. "Alex, Sarah, you're here. Daniel is just opening his gift from us," she announced, guiding us toward the dining room. The atmosphere was thick with forced pleasantries. I observed my father, Mark. He was a master of evasion. His eyes would slide past me, never quite making contact. He'd engage me in conversation, but it was always superficial, about the weather, about sports, about anything other than my life, my work, my accomplishments. It was a deliberate, calculated dismissal. I was a guest in his house, but I was not truly welcome. I was an inconvenient truth. The tension began to coil tighter just before we sat down for dinner. I was standing near the fireplace when I overheard my mother talking to Mrs. Thompson, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "The brunches at Westwater are simply divine," Linda was saying. "Mark and I have met the most fascinating people. The CEO of that large manufacturing plant, a state senator. It's just a different caliber of person, you know." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her eyes wide with admiration. I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. I was paying for that different caliber of person. I was funding the very stage on which she performed. Her social superiority. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I made my way to the dining room, determined to navigate the evening without incident. I had a gift for Daniel, a beautiful, expensive watch that I knew he'd been desiring. As I handed it to him, my mother was right there, peering over his shoulder. "Oh, another extravagant gift," she commented, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I do hope you're not just squandering your money, Alex. Taste can't be acquired, you know." It was a direct hit, cloaked in the guise of maternal advice. Just before we took our seats, Sarah pulled me aside in the hallway. Her eyes were pleading. "Alex, please, let's just leave. This isn't healthy. Look at you. Your jaw is so tight you're about to snap. I looked at her, at the genuine affection and concern on her face. She was right. Every part of me wanted to turn and walk out that door. But something had shifted in me. The years of quiet frustration had solidified into a kind of resolve. I wasn't there hoping for a different outcome anymore. I was there for a conclusion. I know, I stated, my voice quiet but firm. But I need them to articulate it, Sarah. I need to hear it from them. No more hints, no more backhanded comments. I need them to express what they genuinely believe, aloud. I need it to be truly over. She searched my face, and whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. She understood. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about ending a conflict. We took our places at the table. The conversation flowed around me, a river I was no longer a part of. Mark discussed his golf game, Linda talked about an upcoming charity gala. Daniel spoke about his new responsibilities at work. I observed them, feeling like an anthropologist studying a peculiar, distant tribe, my own family. I felt the storm clouds gathering, the atmospheric pressure dropping. I could discern the lightning flashing in my mother's eyes every time she glanced at me. I could sense the low rumble of my father's resentment beneath his calm exterior. The storm was approaching, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to endure the downpour. The main course was served, and with it, the main event. It commenced as it always did, with a seemingly innocent question. Mr. Thompson, a well-meaning but oblivious man, turned to me. "So, Alex," Mark tells us, "you're doing quite well with your internet company. Must be exciting." Before I could respond, my mother interjected. "It's certainly time-consuming," she stated, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Alex works so diligently on his little computer." I ignored the jab. I turned to Daniel. "So, the new role," I said, attempting to redirect the conversation back to him. "You'll be managing a team of 12, correct? My advice, for what it's worth, is to have one-on-one meetings within the first week. It builds trust faster than anything." My mother placed her fork down with a sharp click. "Alex, please. I'm sure Grant and Lel has a very capable HR department. Daniel doesn't need management tips from someone who's never held a real corporate job." The table fell silent. This was it, the opening volley. I took a slow sip of water. "I manage 120 employees, Mom. We occupy an entire floor in one of the largest office buildings in Columbus. It is a real job." My voice was calm but firm. The years of holding my tongue were over. "Oh, here we go," she sighed, rolling her eyes at Linda Thompson. "This is what he does. He gets defensive because he's insecure about his lack of proper education." Insecure? I let out a short, humorless laugh. "I'm not the one who's insecure, Mom. I paid off Daniel's $60,000 student loan debt from that proper education. I paid $75,000 for Dad's heart surgery. This very house had its roof replaced last summer on my dime. I'm not insecure. I'm just exhausted." I hadn't intended to reveal it all. It simply poured out, a torrent of suppressed facts. Daniel sank lower in his chair, his face crimson. My mother's face went pale, then flushed a blotchy, furious red. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "How dare you flaunt your money in our faces? You think you can just buy your way into this family, buy our respect? We don't need your filthy money." The air crackled, and in that moment, witnessing the pure, unadulterated fury on her face, something within me finally clicked into place. All the years of striving, of hoping, of breaking myself to fit their mold, it all dissipated. And all that remained was a cold, hard clarity. I leaned back in my chair, and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed the key to his own prison cell. "Really, Mom?" I stated, my voice dangerously soft. "You don't need my filthy money?" I held her gaze. "Then I suppose I should contact Westwater Country Club tomorrow and cancel the membership I've been secretly paying for these last 2 years. You could have heard a pin drop." The sound of Mrs. Thompson's gasp was like a gunshot in the silence. She and her husband exchanged a wide-eyed look of horror and embarrassment. I saw them physically recoil, subtly shifting their chairs an inch away from my parents, as if mere proximity might be contagious. They were no longer just observers. They were the jury, and the verdict was in. My mother's mouth opened and closed, like a fish, but no sound emerged. Her entire social standing, the foundation of her identity, had just been obliterated in front of her friends. She looked at me, her eyes filled not with anger anymore, but with a dawning, raw panic. I turned, my gaze to my father. He had been silent throughout the exchange, a thundercloud of a man at the head of the table. I expected him to try to smooth things over, to play the peacemaker as he so often pretended to do. I was mistaken. The shame of being exposed, of having his comfortable life revealed as a charitable case funded by the son he secretly disdained, was too much for him to endure. The placid mask didn't just crack, it was annihilated by a volcanic rage. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. His face was purple, a vein throbbing in his temple. He wasn't looking at my mother. He wasn't looking at the Thompsons. His eyes, burning with a lifetime of resentment, were fixed on me. He pointed a trembling finger, his whole body shaking with fury. "We've all pretended long enough," he roared, his voice a raw, ugly sound that permeated every corner of the room. It was the howl of a proud man pushed past his breaking point. "Get out of our lives, you low life." The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Low life, the one epithet he knew would cut the deepest, the summation of everything he had ever thought about me, now exposed for all to see. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply nodded slowly. This was the moment I had been anticipating. The moment Sarah and I had discussed, the final, undeniable truth. I calmly rose and placed my napkin beside my untouched plate of food. I looked at my father, this stranger with a face contorted by rage. "Okay," I reiterated, just as I had in my head 1,000 times. The word was quiet, but it was the loudest thing I had ever uttered. I extended my hand to Sarah. She was already standing, her eyes blazing with a protective fire. She took my hand, her grip an anchor in the swirling chaos. We walked away from the table. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The image was seared into my mind forever. My mother frozen in silent horror, Daniel staring at his hands as if they held the solutions, the Thompsons desperately wishing they were anywhere else, and my father standing and trembling, a monarch, who had just willingly dismantled his own dominion. As we reached the front door, my mother finally found her voice. "You're turning everyone against us," she shrieked from the dining room. "This is all your fault." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, turned my head slightly, and said to the empty hallway, "No, Mom, this is all yours." Then we stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of our family behind us. The door clicked shut, and for the first time, I tasted the sweet, sharp, exhilarating flavor of freedom. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silence. The car was a sanctuary, a protective bubble shielding us from the radioactive fallout we'd left behind. Sarah drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I gazed out the passenger window, watching the familiar Ohio suburbs slide by like scenes from someone else's life. I should have been devastated. I should have been angry or heartbroken. But what I felt more than anything was an unsettling sense of peace. The conflict was over. I hadn't won, not in the traditional sense, but I had endured. I had departed the battlefield, wounded but whole, leaving them to their ruins. When we arrived home, the silence followed us inside. We walked through our house, a house I'd purchased, filled with possessions I'd earned, and it felt different, felt truly mine in a way it never had before. It was no longer a place I had to justify. It was simply home. Sarah finally broke the silence. "What now?" she asked, her voice soft in the quiet living room. I turned to face her. "Florida," I stated. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration. We owned a small beach house in the Keys, a place we acquired for vacations and escape. Now it was going to be a refuge. "We're going to Florida for a while. Maybe for good." She nodded, a slow, sad smile touching her lips. "I'll pack a bag." The next few days were a masterclass in toxic family dynamics. The first call came 2 days after the gathering. It was my mother. I saw her name on the screen, and my stomach tightened, an old, conditioned response. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a rambling, tear-filled tirade. It wasn't an apology, it was an accusation. "I can't believe what you've done to this family, Alex." Her voice wavered with self-pity. "The Thompsons won't even return my calls. You humiliated us. You humiliated your father. After everything we've done for you, you need to rectify this." I deleted the message. It was a language I no longer spoke. The following day, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me needed to hear what he had to say. "Alex," he began, his voice gruff, stripped of the previous night's rage and replaced with an impatient authority. There was no hello, no how are you, Dad, I replied, my voice neutral. "Your mother is a wreck," he stated, as if this were my problem to resolve. "You need to call her, and you need to call the Thompsons and explain yourself. This has gone on long enough. You have to fix this." The audacity of it, the complete lack of self-awareness, was staggering. They had cast me out, called me a low life, and now they were ordering me to clean up their mess. That was the moment the last chain snapped. "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt immense. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "What did you say?" he demanded, disbelief coloring his tone. I said no. I reiterated, my voice stronger now. "I will not be fixing this. This is your mess. You and Mom need to figure it out. I'm done. I'm done trying. I'm done paying and I'm done being your emotional punching bag. Don't call me again until you're ready to have a genuine conversation, which begins with a sincere apology from both of you." I could hear him sputtering, but I didn't wait to hear the words. I said, "Goodbye, Dad," and I hung up the phone. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I blocked his number, and then I blocked my mother's. The silence that followed was blissful. It was the sound of my own life, uninterrupted. Sarah and I booked one-way tickets to Florida. We packed what we needed, arranged for the rest to be shipped, and informed our closest friends we were relocating. We didn't make a grand announcement. We simply departed. As we were boarding the plane, my phone vibrated with an unrecognized number. I almost disregarded it, but something prompted me to answer. "Hello. Alex, it's me." It was Daniel. His voice was quiet, hesitant. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I waited, unsure what to say. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything." He continued, his voice cracking slightly. "At dinner, I just froze. But what they did, what Dad said, it wasn't right. I know you've done a lot for us, for me, and I'm sorry I was an idiot about it." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. It was a tiny sliver of light in the darkness. "Thank you, Daniel," I said, and I meant it. "That means a great deal." "Where are you?" he inquired. "Getting on a plane," I stated, looking out the terminal window at the clear blue sky. "Going somewhere warm. I'll call you when I get there." We hung up, and as the plane ascended, leaving the gray landscape of Ohio behind, I felt the last of the burden fall away. I was flying toward the sun, toward a new existence, one that I would construct on my own terms. The storm was over. Now it was time to observe what would flourish in the quiet aftermath. 6 months passed, 6 months of sunshine, salty air, and blessed, beautiful silence. Florida wasn't just a location, it was a different state of being. The oppressive weight of my family's expectations, a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in, had lifted. I could breathe. Sarah and I found a rhythm. We'd wake early, have coffee on the deck overlooking the turquoise water, and watch the pelicans dive for their breakfast. I established a new headquarters for Momentum Digital in a sleek office building in Miami. The relocation energized the company. We attracted an entirely new pool of creative talent, people drawn to the vibrant, forward-thinking culture we were cultivating. We were flourishing. I was flourishing. I had reconnected with Daniel. Our phone calls were still a little awkward, but the old resentment was gone, replaced by a tentative, fragile respect. He informed me things were tense back home. My parents had been compelled to confront the financial reality of their situation. The country club membership had indeed been canceled. Their lavish spending had to be curtailed. They were living within their means for the first time in years, and they were miserable. Then one day, Daniel called with a warning. "They're coming," he said. "What do you mean?" "They're coming. Mom and Dad. They're flying to Florida next week. They said they want to talk. They don't have my number or my address," I stated, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "They got the address from me," he admitted, his voice full of apology. "Alex, I'm so sorry." Mom was crying, Dad was. I don't know, he looked old. They swore they just wanted to fix things. I gave in. I was angry for a second, then I sighed. I understood. The machinery of parental guilt was potent. "It's okay, Daniel. Let them come." A week later, they arrived, but the day they were scheduled to land, something else occurred, something that altered the entire dynamic of their visit before it even began. I was having lunch at a waterfront restaurant, a power lunch with a very important client, Mr. Peterson, the CEO of a national hotel chain. We were in discussions with him. He was in his 60s, a titan of industry, a man who commanded respect in every room he entered. He was recounting his own beginnings, how he built his empire from a single roadside motel. "People who haven't built something from scratch will never truly comprehend it, Alex," he stated, gesturing with his fork. "They see the success, but they don't see the nights you didn't sleep, the risks you took. They don't respect the grit. I respect the grit." He raised his glass. "To grit." We clinked glasses, a mutual understanding passing between us. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated respect from a man who embodied everything my father aspired to be. And as I looked up from our table, I saw them, my parents, Mark and Linda. They were standing awkwardly by the hostess stand, clearly having just arrived. They must have come directly from the airport. They saw me. They saw me laughing, sharing a toast, completely at ease with a man of Mr. Peterson's standing. They saw me in my new world, a world where I didn't require them, a world where I was not the supplicant, the disappointment, the low life. Here I was, the one with the authority. They had to stand there and wait. The hostess, unaware of the family drama unfolding, politely informed them there would be a 15-minute wait for a table. I saw my father's shoulders slump just slightly. I saw my mother's face tighten, a flicker of the old indignation warring with a new, unfamiliar sense of powerlessness. The balance had shifted, not because I had willed it, but because I had constructed a life so far beyond their orbit that they could no longer exert their gravitational pull. When they finally came to my house that evening, the tension was palpable. The house itself, with its clean lines, its open-plan living space, its stunning view of the ocean, was a testament to an achievement they could no longer deny. My father was quiet, subdued. My mother attempted to maintain her air of matriarchal authority, but it was fragile. Sarah was polite but distant, a coolly elegant gatekeeper to our new existence. Later that evening, while I was conversing with my father on the deck, my mother had a moment alone with Sarah in the kitchen. I only discovered what was said later. Sarah had offered her a glass of wine. Linda accepted, her hands trembling slightly. She looked around the spacious, modern kitchen. "It's a beautiful home, Sarah," she stated, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Linda. Alex has worked very diligently." Linda was quiet for a long moment, gazing out at the darkening water. Then she uttered something that stunned Sarah into silence. "I wanted to open a flower shop once," she confessed, her gaze distant. "Years ago, before Daniel was born. I had it all planned out, a little place downtown. But Mark, your father, he said it wasn't a sensible career, that a wife's place was at home." She took a shaky sip of wine. "He said I wasn't cut out for business. It wasn't an excuse, it wasn't an apology, but it was an explanation, a tiny window into the heart of her bitterness. Her resentment of my success wasn't solely about my lack of a degree. It was about my freedom. I had accomplished the very thing she had been denied." The visit concluded without a major breakthrough. There was no tearful apology, no grand reconciliation. But something had fundamentally changed. They were visitors in my life now, not its architects. The power was mine, and I realized I didn't want to use it for revenge. I just desired peace. The morning after they departed, I stood on the deck, a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the sun ascend over the Atlantic. The water was calm, a vast expanse of glittering blue. Sarah came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her head on my back. "Are you okay?" she asked. It was the same question she'd posed to me in the car that night 6 months ago, but this time the answer was different. It wasn't just a grim acceptance. It was a profound and settled tranquility. "I'm better than okay," I stated, leaning back into her embrace. "I'm good." The conversation with my parents had been strained and unsatisfactory in many ways. My father had managed a gruff. I may have been harsh. My mother had stated, "We miss you." It was the best they could offer, and I knew it would have to suffice. The relationship would never be what I had once desperately wanted it to be. It would be a dynamic of careful boundaries, of managed expectations, of loving them from a safe distance. And that was acceptable. I no longer needed their approval. The validation I had yearned for so long, I had finally discovered it, but not from them. I found it in the respect of my peers, like Mr. Peterson. I found it in the loyalty of my brilliant team at work. Most importantly, I found it within myself. I had gazed into the chasm of my family's judgment and chosen to depart, to define myself on my own terms. I looked out at the boundless ocean. For years, I believed prosperity was a figure in a bank account, a number I had to keep increasing to prove my worth. I thought $15 million would be the shield that could protect me from their words. But I was wrong. Their words still stung, right up until the moment I decided they couldn't. True prosperity wasn't the money, the house, or the company. True prosperity was this quiet morning, the sensation of Sarah's arms around me, the freedom to choose who I wanted to be, the realization that my worth was not determined by my father's pride or my mother's shattered dreams. My worth was inherent. It was mine. The sun was higher now, warm on my face. A gentle breeze blew in off the water, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. The conflict was over. The struggle was done. And I had finally, truly arrived home. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way, and perhaps even offered solace to someone out there who feels unseen or unappreciated. Have you ever had to establish a firm boundary with your family to safeguard your own peace? I'd love to hear about your experience. Please share your story in the comments below.